What did you learn about addictions, especially phone addiction, after your time as being someone who went through the process and then trying all of these like techniques, how to get through it and how to get better?
The thing is, addiction is oftentimes tied to something external. Like for me, I always labeled it as, I don't know, I'm phone addicted or I'm addicted to video games. But at the end of the day, it was always me running away from something deeper. And in my case, I think it was loneliness, being shy and not really committing to what I said. Like I was fat for a very long time, and therefore I think that I unconsciously went into my loneliness path and then on and on and on. And the effect of all of this was then the addiction.
Okay, I hear you on that. And the biggest thing, like even in the phone addictions, like we think, oh, it's the phone, but most of the time it's something deeper, like running away from emotions. Even like with me, I sometimes like run away from like my emotion. I suppress them, and I try to build techniques on that, on actually processing those emotions. And I would love to know like what are your techniques and how did you deal with the processing and like the hard stuff of it?
The thing is, when we think about emotion, we often think that we can instantly feel the whole spectrum, but for me in that case, this wasn't that. I was constantly lying to myself about my emotions, but basically about everything in my life. So one of the biggest things or techniques was doing something like a dopamine detox. I call it Sunday detoxing, but you can basically call it whatever you want. I think we will dive deeper into the exact technique, but small like overview of it. You don't use your phone, you don't use your laptop, you don't eat, and you have no social interactions from waking up until going to bed. And what this does is basically take your dopamine baseline, which is probably very high because you only get stimulus from TikTok, from Instagram, and we slowly want to break this down. We want to go to a lower dopamine baseline from someone like your grandparents who aren't that addicted or aren't that stimulated by something like TikTok. So they need basic stuff like work, like a healthy meal to feel the dopamine that you feel when you watch TikTok or Instagram. So this is one of the biggest, if not the biggest technique that I teach people I meet on the street who ask me how to beat my phone addiction, people I meet at local events, people I meet online. So yeah.
Okay. And that's a good point that you even said like social, just interactions, because most people think dopamine detox is just about their phone, but that's not true. Like we get dopamine from lots of stuff. And dopamine detox, most people, even I think a lot of people tried it, but most of people like fall in the first week. What did you do? What were your motivations when? How did you went through the first week or the hardest hours? Like what kept you going and how it might help just a normal person that tries to beat it?
The thing is, many dopamine detoxes are designed with this mindset I'm like telling you right now. You start now, do it for the next 30 days, and then you will be off your phone. And thinking about it, how many % of people do you think can really keep the same mindset, keep the same motivation, keep the same focus for 30 days? I think that's something literally impossible. So what I do instead and what I teach other people is, how about we don't do 30 days? How about we don't do 7 days? How about we only do 1 day a week? For me, it was Sunday. For most people, it's also Sunday. Where you just cut out everything I said to you before. Where you cut out all the high dopamine stuff for 1 day. And what this will do is, probably after the first dopamine detox, you will feel even more addicted because of the yo-yo effect. Give it like 2 or 3 weeks and you will slowly feel the shift hovering over to the Monday and the Saturday maybe. And over time, over a long period like 2 months, 3 months, you will see that this dopamine detoxing will affect every day of the week. And this is what makes this method so much better than the rest, in my opinion, because it works with you. It doesn't force you to throw out everything that was normal to you in order to become someone new, because oftentimes we try to be someone totally new, but our old self is pulling us back all the time. But what this allows is to do a gradual path towards beating the addiction. And to the other point you said, how do I keep on? Because even though it's just one day, you will definitely feel that there's like a pull from your old self that says, okay, check the notification, or you haven't checked your X notifications yet. So in these moments, it's often good to fight against these urges, because at the end of the day, every urge you will have on the other days will be through the same process of just fighting against the thought. And this one day is basically your playground to fight against this demon all the time. Yeah, keep the fight on. And something else that I like people to think about is their attention and intention about how they use their devices, because for me especially, knowing why I'm doing all of this, why I'm podcasting, why I'm writing online, why I'm teaching people this, gave me so much more purpose and so much more clarity that I could tie my phone use to my bigger mission and therefore use it more intentionally. And this helped me in the detox to say, okay, for one day I'm not using it, but also to the other days where I can just say, is this really serving my purpose, or do I want to just use my phone to get a quick dopamine hit? And the more you do it, the more you will get into nature of fighting against it and winning.
Yeah. I feel like it's something like a gym. When you first like go to the gym, you don't pick the hardest dumbbell and just starting to just try to lift it, and like basically you'll hurt yourself or you will quit. You started like the smaller stuff that yes may feel like, oh, it's just like one day or it's just I don't know. But eventually like you will get to that space when you can just lift even those hard dumbbells and you can just go. It feels like that's what you're talking about. And there was this thing that interested me, this yo-yo effect. I've never heard of it. And like,
The yo-yo effect is something, I think it's from dieting, that like there's always a period where you just sometimes go all in. You just cut out all the sugar, you fast for like 3 days. And what the yo-yo effect says is that when you do such a radical change once, that you will come back from it. Like naturally, you want to go back to your default self. But once you like go up, the yo-yo effect says that you can even go further and have worse habits than before.
yeah, interesting. Never heard of it. Great. I even feel like when I did my research, like I think there you have this offer called Focused Entrepreneur, and I think that's about it, about beating like your addictions, as we call it, and being more focused. Because I feel like you have a lot of passion about this topic, and you have like really just been through it. Because sometimes when I watch even some creators on the internet that are selling something, you can see that they don't have a much experience or they don't know much about this topic. But I like from what I'm like listening to right now and like just getting in, like I feel like you really have been through it, and that's really great. That I think most great businesses or great products start that like you have a story that you want to share. You solved a big problem, especially when there's all of us are, I think, almost addicted to our phones, at least to some extent. And it's really good to just even like gets through it, because like it's a process, and it's not just like one way thing. Like something like needs to change, and you don't need to change from just one day. It can be like a process, as everything is. So I think that's really interesting. And other thing that like really like interested me, like as you said, like being focused. I think you touched on the topic like being the importance of your time and how you actually just use it and for what you use it. So how did your perspective about time changed when like you started like doing these dopamine detoxes and more stuff?
You have to, like, for me, I once, or this was like very far back, I think I was like 15. Then I saw this one clip from, it was like an Instagram reel, where the guy said, okay, you have 3 parts in your day. 8 hours is sleep, the other 8 hours is work, and the other 8 hours should go towards your purpose. And this was like a reel I watched 5 years ago, but only recently I started thinking about it again. And what I noticed, and what I can basically see from my whole year as a process, is that I went from having this 8 hours of purpose time that should be towards my craft, that should be towards my art, that it all went to scrolling. It was in another person's life with their totally own story, and I was just like observing it. I was just a consumer. And looking back at my journal entry from the beginning of 2025, said like the first day I had like a screen time of 6 hours, then it was like 3 hours, and the third or the fourth day, I don't really know, was 10 hours. So even thinking about that, even thinking about wasting 10 hours a day, and imagine this compounding over a year, how many living moments, how many opportunities to create something you lose just because of that. And right now, I'm at a phase where I try to expand my like thoughts on this topic, because at the beginning I was like there. I had this 10-hour like screen time, pulled it down to basically 1 hour, but I still had like 8 hours left that I could use for basically anything. And what I noticed over the last few months was that for most people who aren't creators, this new gap they have will feel like very boring time that doesn't really serve any purpose at all. And right now I'm trying to figuring out how to efficiently fill this time. Because imagine you woke up, you went to work like for 8 hours, come back home, and still have like 6 hours left. You know you don't use your phone because you now have a dopamine baseline that is lower, that you feel fulfilled from eating healthy, from work. But if you don't really have anything to fill this time, what do you really do? And this is where I'm now at, which I explore, because for the last month I like turned off all my creations. I used to post basically every day, and for the last 4 weeks, I posted nothing because I just needed a little bit of a break from creating. But this allowed me to think more about how I should now use my time. And it was also a little bit of a stressful time for myself because I had to write a thesis and everything. But it gave me a lot of time to think about how I want to structure my days, how I want to structure this 8 hours. Or for me, it's oftentimes sick creation. And since I had like a whole month to think about it, I think that I now have a nearly perfect fit for me. But now it's the time to try it out and to generalize it to wherever I want to publish it. But yeah.
That's a really great point you had, and I've catch on like you wrote a thesis, and as we said in many podcasts, like you said, like about your university and stories from there and how you and you seem like really passionate about it. So like, what do you study?
I'm studying applied mathematics and computer science. It's a dual study, so you basically like have all your studies and at the same time you are working. And the working part I'm doing at a neuroscience institute, so I think you can see the connection to my creations here. But yeah, it's a study that is very time consuming, so beating my phone addiction was basically the only way I could stay sane and could create what I created here. But yeah, my study is going great. I wrote my first ever thesis, which is about imaging. To a very basic degree, it's looking at two images, and you basically have like 1,000, like let's put it here, of a brain, and they are all like cut in very thin like slices that you at the end have like 1,000 images from one brain, and they are always like rotated a little bit because they are like moved a little bit here and there. And my goal was to basically validate if the images that are now like on top of each other in the same direction. So at the end, when you go through the whole image series, that you can see that there is, or that they are all directed in the same way and positioned in a similar way, that once you have a 3D, like a 3D view of it, that it's very smooth and like the real brain. But yeah, this is what I worked on, and today I handed in my thesis, and hopefully I will get a great or good grade. But other than that, I brought in neuroscience one, even though it's a very small step, but further, and that's a very meaningful thing.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I hope you get a good grade from that. So, and you mentioned the neuroscience, which I'm actually interested in, even like computer science. What did you learn about like how our brains work that helped you really in like content and making content the biggest lesson you took?
The thing is, everything I learned about behavior or everything like that, I learned by myself. This wasn't something I learned at the institute. At the institute, we often only work with images that tell us or that tell me nothing because I haven't studied it like deeply. I'm not a doctor at all. I'm just doing my bachelor. So what I do most of the times is just working with images. But we have like a big retreat every year where everyone from our whole institute comes together and shows their work. And there we have the cool guys who are working on behavior, etc. And yeah, most of them do like very fancy stuff I don't really understand. But one guy is working on creatine, the one like I don't know what to call it, drug, but the one thing you always take before the gym to basically live better. And he's like working on it. I think it's one of the only things he's working on, but he's such an expert in it. And every year when we have like this retreat, I go to this guy and ask like, okay, how much creatine should I take? How much this and that and that? So yeah, this is like the one thing I learned the most from the institute in terms of my real life, where I love training, where I love creating, etc., etc.
Okay. Yeah. So you go to the gym, right? So you
Yes.
like take creatine and you talk about it in a lot in your podcast, which is again great b- because what I liked really about your podcast is that you don't like you are not afraid to share something even from your personal life. And that's the one thing that really connects with me and even with other podcasters. So, what is the thing you would say to or you would advise to a beginner podcaster.
Should I now talk more about like the storytelling part or in general?
First, you can more in general, then you can bring more storytelling into it, because I think it's a big part.
So generally speaking, this is now just my perspective on the things from someone who got through beginner hell. And the thing is, podcasting is very different from any other like content form because it involves always 2, 3, or 4 people, and you have to always tie the whole podcast to one specific point. And for like me, I always say this, but my inspiration is Stephen Bartlett, and his podcast is centered around the guest always. So I don't want to say that I copied him, but it's like a very cool form of podcasting because it always allows to talk about something new and learn something new. So this is where I just started. I had like my good friend Julian who said, okay, can we do a podcast? Well, I think I should start at the beginning. So we had a call in July. Then we had like 1 hour of such an amazing talk. And at the end, I still had like a few questions left and said like, okay, Julian, I still have so many questions. Can you maybe answer them? And his response to this was, do you really think that others would benefit from this as well? And my immediate answer was, yes, of course. These are like questions that everyone could benefit from, especially hearing the answer from you. So then he offered me to do a podcast with him, and I said, okay, let's do it. So then we scheduled one in 2 weeks. So I was there like, okay, I never really podcast in my life. How do I do it? So I looked up softwares, I looked up everything possible. I looked up microphones, headphones, strategies, and at the end of the day, I did everything wrong. I asked the wrong questions. I used the wrong microphone. I didn't pay for the software. Because of that, there was always a Riverside logo at one of the corners. So yeah, it was very messy. But this is my first advice to someone who's just starting a podcast is don't fear to be a beginner. Every single one of us just started from doing our first recordings and just talking to a camera, no matter how shit it is. So yeah, that's my first advice, to just publish whatever is in your hands, because you can't redo an episode. So at the end of the day, you only have this one episode you created. So just publish it. And don't fear to be a beginner. You have to know that 50% of the podcasts end after episode 3. So just getting through the first 3 or 5 episodes, knowing that they are not good and knowing that you will improve is such a big thing. The other point that is similar to this is always take one thing and improve it the next time. This is something I did naturally. For the first podcast, it was turning on the right microphone. For the other one, it was trying a new note-taking system. For the next one, it was including a little bit of humor in it. So yeah, it just took a lot of tries. For me, it was now 18 or 19 tries to get where I'm at right now. And you have to know that I couldn't be here if I didn't do all of these tries. So this is my second tip, is to just take one thing and improve it the next time. Because it's simple. You just think about one thing that you want to improve, because the rest, the basics, you always have them. But you will do one step each time. And once I look back at my old episodes, I'm there, or I think about myself how could he ever podcast, or how did he speak this worse, or why was he so shy on the camera? So yeah, that's my second point. And another big tip is to don't really fixate yourself to one audience. Because at the beginning, thankfully, I had someone very far from my original niche. So I was able to podcast him. Then I went to my normal niche, podcast basically everyone I knew on it there. But only recently I started expanding this, because you have to know, we as humans, we are always curious. And since I myself am curious in content creation, that's why I'm in my niche. But I'm also very interested in coaching. So I had a few coaches on my podcast. I'm also curious about arts. So I had an actress on my podcast, which I will publish soon. But just don't fixate yourself on one niche, but instead allow many people into your podcast. Because some of the craziest conversations I had and some of the biggest lessons I had in my podcasting time came from this conversations I had with very creative people, with people that I normally couldn't talk if I stuck in my niche. So yeah, that's my third advice, and I could probably go on and on and on, but I think that you have further questions.
Yeah, there are a lot of points I could touch on, and with Stephen Bartlett, he's my big inspiration too, so I absolutely agree. Plus with Chris Williamson, those are the two guys that even got me into the podcasting. And one of the questions I'm most curious about is, what were the biggest lessons you learned on this podcast? When you were you ended the podcast and you were I'm changed. This changed me.
The thing is, I always took one lesson from each podcast. This is also something. So one thing I improve and one thing I learn or apply to my life. So I can basically tell you what I learned from the last episode, which was with Alex Mundy. He was basically the Stephen Bartlett before Stephen Bartlett was a thing, which is really funny. He had the biggest podcast in the UK around creatives, around creators. So from him, I learned that we as human beings have two states, one default being and one created being. Our default being is something that just exists. So for me, it would probably be myself going to uni each day, going to work each day, who comes home, who maybe lifts weights 2 times a day and eats normal. This is my default being, and nothing would change in my life if I just stayed there. But then there's this created being who is the version of ourselves we want to become. So for me, it's the person who is independent from his work, who has an online business that provides for him, and who has a very aesthetic body, who runs a marathon. So this is my created being, and what he basically told me is that you can't be at your created being all the time, because this would take so much energy and so much effort that no one can really do this except crazy people like Andrew Tate or Elon Musk. So this very crazy people. But we as, I don't want to call us normal human beings, but we as conscious beings who want to improve, always follow this trajectory of having a created being, pursuing it, but falling back to the default being, which is natural. We go out of energy, we go out of resources, so it's natural that we fall back to our default being. But what he says is that once we let these two dance, once we let ourselves to be our created being and let our default being follow it a little bit, we can gradually improve ourselves in both ways. So we have our created being, we have our default being, and once we let them two dance and once we switch to them long enough, we will increase both. So let's say in 6 months, when I am my created being, I can now say, okay, the new Abbi should make $100,000 a month, who went to the high rocks and won it under a certain time. or who is independent in where he lives, and now he's living at an Italian beach. So yeah, these are things that like should care my future self. That's why I'm not thinking about it right now. That's why I'm just visualizing it from time to time. But for now, I always have like this created being that I can go to, that I can, once I put all my energy and all my resources in, that I can be that version of myself, or to at least be on the path of being this person, because now I can't run a marathon, but the second best thing I can do is training for it. So yeah, this is one of the biggest lessons that changed me ever since.
Really interesting. I know this quote that goes like, a man has two lives. One that's living in like right now, and a second one like once he realizes that he has only one life. And it was like really similar because having this like default being and this created being, like I can maybe relate to that. Like we always have a standard we try to catch up on, but we like even fell short, even as you said, the yo-yo effect. But like it's important to like go for it again and again, and then like you improve constantly. I think there are like a lot of like similar ideas like this, but not structured this way. But cool idea, to be honest. And I think like in your podcast, like with Sin Canela, you mentioned that you became like once the podcast was going on, you became a much better like listener and communicator. And my question is like, what are the other ways you improved like your communication as with this podcast other than listening?
This is actually something I did a lot recently. So I recently became a volunteer and like a co-creator of the offline club in my city. And for those who don't know what the offline club is, it's basically you gathering around with people once a week. And what you do in this time is basically put away your phone and just be there in the present moment and do basically nothing digital and just talking to people. So yeah, that's something that improved my communication skills, but also my confidence, my being as a whole. Because what it allowed me was stepping out of my comfort zone. My comfort zone was always being on my phone on the bed or creating alone with my laptop. But what this allowed me is to step out of this default being and allow to experience new things, like talking to someone for 1 hour without thinking about anything else except what they are telling me, or just seeing people in real life that have fun talking to each other. That's something that seems so unrealistic in today's world, but there it's possible. Yeah, I think that it's like one of the biggest movements in the city right now. And what we will create in the next like year will be crazy. But yeah, that's something that improved my communication skills a lot. But in terms of podcasting, what helped me a lot was just reviewing my episodes, like going through the edit, looking at myself, what I did wrong, what I did right earlier. So yeah, these two things are what helped me a lot, but oftentimes it always comes down to being at the present moment, to removing all the distractions and allowing your full attention to be at the person in front of you. So yeah.
Yeah, that's really good point and like interesting, like the club in your city. I've never heard of it, but it seems like really cool and really helpful that people are trying to like connect again, because many podcasters, many people are talking about the loneliness crisis we have, which I think it's really real, and like communities like this and just creating this kind of environment is I think it's really helpful. And then you just like once you get aware of it, like you try to just delete it and it gets better every time. For example, like when I had a back in the days YouTube channel, I was too aware of myself. That wasn't much good, but once like you get in the flow, and even with conversations, even with calls, like once you just pay the full attention, your full attention like into the person and what they are talking, it can be really better. How do you think, like you said about the club, how do you think people could start like something similar, like with their friends or in their like community, or just like with even like people on the internet, start like actually talking to them, not only mm, just write those messages and other like other things, and just connect with other people more?
I think online it's pretty, or it's as simple as asking the person to have an, like, I don't know how to call it, connection call. I think that no one is really that grumpy to say, I don't want to call you, first give me the money. I hadn't had anyone like this ever. And everyone I asked to have like a connection call said, all right, let's do it. And even better, if you have a podcast, you can easily say, hey, hop on my podcast. And no one said no so far. So I think that you understand my point that having a podcast like this allows you to connect with people that you normally couldn't. But to the connection thing offline, I think we all have like a few friends that, even though they might not be like interested in what we do online, that are like there since our childhood and who we can call brothers and sisters. And I thankfully have one of these friends. He is like very different in so many ways than me, but we still like we are still like brothers. And with him I can do this basically once a month because he's now went to a different city. But once he's back, once a week, just take a friend, go outside, go to a cafe, and just chill, talk. Because just having this 3 or 4 hours of not being on your work or not thinking about what you're creating just allows your mind to rewire itself, to maybe switch off and turn back on, and to expand its capabilities. Because, like most of the things we talked about in this talk, you can't always be at 100%. And this is one thing that you can use to your advantage. You can, instead of just sleeping or wasting time, you can go out and be with your friends. I will now be part of it because it's something that's so aligned with what I do. But for others, it may be something they are passionate about, that. So finding events in your city, like locally, is a very big point because it allows you to meet like-minded people. I basically took this to a whole nother level at the beginning and just went to London to meet or to go to one of my friends' events. Yeah, just start locally, find a few events here and there, and just go to them. You don't have to do like these crazy cold approach videos like everyone is doing online, which I find, I don't want to call it cringy, but it's not how we humans create deep connections. Yes, oftentimes it's like a random connection of two people, but what these local events allow you is to know that you both have a similar point. For the offline club, it's not being on your phone. And since I'm basically, or now I'm like entitled by the core group as the phone addiction guy, I now have a group of people that I can help. Like, for example, 2 of my email subscribers are friends I made there who I really love, and one of them is basically the best storyteller I ever met, and the other guy is basically a huge comedian. I didn't know it before, and funnily enough, my aunt is like following this guy on Instagram, which is also wild. So yeah, just go to local events, talk to people, don't be afraid to like talk to people on the event, because everyone who is there just wants to be there and talk about what you know. They can talk about what they know and just make a great time out of it.
You seem like even the time, like you said, the time you had offline and you haven't been posting lately, that you learned a lot. You have been through all of these courses and connections. Do you like recommend other people to like try this, even other creators, to just have their like a week or two, not even a month or something, to just have to like live their life and explore the world like above being online or above just like being on their laptop, on their phone?
It's definitely something I would recommend, but depending on your stage of a creator. For me, it was just that I was totally drained, because if you think about like social media, you have to know that those who are winning did a lot of volume at the beginning. They did like all the cold approach, all the cold DMs, cold calls. They engaged like 24/7 under people's comments. And I went through this phase a lot. I did it like from time to time, but like dipped down very quickly. So I did it for like a few days, but then stopped doing it for like 3 or 4 days. And then the next week started and I did it again. And I just wanted to break out of the cycle of like doing it for a certain period of time and then giving up. So I gave myself a whole month of just thinking about what I want to create. And what I came up was that I don't really want to be the person I'm presenting myself as right now. So, of course, my long form content I still love. I still love every episode of my podcast. But the short form stuff I'm sharing on X or Substack isn't something I'm that confident about, and something that doesn't really seem aligned. And there was like thinking about how I want to create more like the people I really look up to. And I listened to a lot of music in this period. And even like in the last month, I bought 6 new CDs from artists I really like. And over time, I notice how creation is basically the combination of art and truth. That the thing you're creating is basically you packaging truth in your own form. So I listen to people like Kanye West, who is and will forever be one of the biggest inspirations I have, even though he is very controversial in so many points, but he is like one of the guys I look up to. NF. So musicians as a whole are people I neglected for a long time, was thinking like, okay, they're giving me just dopamine. But at the end of the day, they are what inspired most of the stuff I did. So I turned off all the content, like I said, from 1 month. I haven't really been active on social media. I didn't do like the engagement thing at all. And what has allowed me was finding true inspiration from things that I'm genuinely passionate about. And yeah, this shifted how I will treat content in the future. It changed the way I thought about me as a creator, and it will definitely change the content I will produce in the future. And what I wrote in this time is way more aligned with who I really am and who I want to become. So yeah, just having 1 month of truly thinking about your brand from a third perspective and from a totally different lens can definitely expand so many things. I would recommend it, but if you're just starting out, or if you don't really have something you can go back to once you do the break, this was where I was like last year, or maybe even until April. I tried to do these breaks, but once I came back, I started from complete scratch. But now I know that I still have my podcast. I still have like my core message of how to beat the phone addiction, how to get more focus. So yeah, doing a break once you have something or a foundation is definitely something I would recommend.
It's very cool that you mentioned those artists like Kanye West, like it's controversial and stuff, but like we can take that he knows how to like make some good music and art. And even like I had those periods when I was thinking about how to manage the art side of content creation and like delivering your truth and like collaborating and packaging it in the best way, and the business side of all the things, coaching, trying to be this one person business or a micro business. And I'm really like interested about like how do you want to get on like this journey, like managing those things.
The thing is, the art part is more centered around the content. You can't just like, so there's like a certain point in like someone discovering your content that they will come across this business point where you have to create value in order for them to pay you. But everything else, from people who are watching your content, whose attention you try to grab, you want to do this in the most natural form possible, and art is one of the most natural forms. Like I said, it's the truth packaged in your own way. Yeah, managing the art part and the business part, it's just knowing what the art part is and what the business side is. And for me, it took a very long time to discover what really I should consider art and what I should consider like business. And for most people, especially on X, they think that even the creation part, even the content part should be business. But this is, in my opinion, total bullshit. You can't sell something by telling that you are selling something. That's not how real business works. Real business is always selling a transformation in some form or another, going from one point to another. And what you see from artists is they grab your current emotion and they just shift it in the way they are feeling right now. Like, for example, when you listen to an NF song, you maybe feel very hyped, but in the underlying tone, it's very melancholy, and you feel that this guy had a very impactful story, and you keep listening to him because it does something in you, and these are the emotions that you want to sell at the end. Like, there could be someone like NF who's selling bad emotions. I still love this guy, but this is the way his music is. Or you can take the complete opposite part, Kanye West, who's just giving you so much motivation and so much truth and so much life energy that you just can't stop listening to him. So what this content part of it is basically you want to create art that transfers some sort of emotion that takes the reader from the current emotional state and put them to your emotional state. But yeah, once you go further, you have something like, so these are just short form content or like middle long content that are fully focused on art. Then you have the more formal stuff, which I would say is your newsletter. There you go deeper into whatever you try to say. In art, it's very abstract. You work with a lot of visuals. There you really want to go into the meat. You want to really define what you're saying, go to the root of it, start at the origin, tell a story, etc., etc. But these are the things where the reader goes from, okay, they're feeling the emotion, to now understanding it. So they start to understand how you think, what you're thinking about, how this applies to their life. And at the end, like, this would be what you're selling at the end. For me right now, it's coaching people on their phone addiction. Yes, I'm basically giving away all the information for free. So the focus entrepreneur thing you mentioned earlier, it's just a warp to where people can come together, share their wins and failures, and just have a community around them of people who genuinely want to beat their phone addiction. and the information in there, all the courses that will come out in the future, they will all be free. Because what I learned from Alex Hormozy is you should always give away the information for free, but sell the application. And coaching and even consulting is at the end the application part of all of this. And this is where I will charge money at the end. This is where the business things will turn into money. But you need all of these things before that in order for people to come and pay you to get the value they really want. And especially as someone who has solved such a big problem, I think that every problem in the world has an audience. But for me at the beginning, it was very hard because I had such a broad topic and such a broad audience I was talking to that I couldn't really talk to a certain person. But once I started to create more in alignment with myself, I pulled the right people into my content, into what these people are seeing, even to a point where now someone I met offline at the offline club was really interested in my work and is now working with me. So yeah, these are the three things or the three steps of how I see art and business work together.
Well, interesting, and like I think it's like a really good way how to, or even like, well, at least interesting way how to package it, because yes, there is a clear distinction between like the creator way and the business, and I think there may like should be like some line that there is, because I think creating something can be a lot different when you are in the business stuff, and especially like, well, like when you're like trying to give something, as you said, like with Alex Hormozy, and like to get like the last bit on the content creation stuff and like the art form. How do you, when for example, even I read something or other people like I think may feel the same way, is like when you create something and you just like write it, you're proud of it, but it doesn't feel yours. In the sense, like everything, of course, is created out of something, like a real originality. Like it's just a mash of things that are in your head. But how do you like go to the way like making it yours and like being the your truth you package, and being like not just someone else's art that you, for example, listen to or you consume?
The thing is, you can never really copy as long as you don't press Ctrl C, Ctrl V. Because once I listen to an artist, I'm just thinking about what he said, and I'm not instantly writing while I'm listening to the music. I'm probably listening to the music early on, and then think about the verses, think about the melody, and then start writing. So, yeah, I think that putting your true self into the art or into the content oftentimes comes from moments of reflecting on your thoughts, a moment of really thinking about what you just read, what you just listened to, what you just watched. And in this moment of thinking about it, you create your own perspective on these things, because now your brain works. Now it tries to wire what you had earlier to your current mind. And this is where true magic happens. And this is where Denko often says, like, now you are like remixing thoughts, remixing ideas. And this is basically life as a whole. Life as a whole is you see something, you have your current self, and it's always like once this thing is influencing you, you raise yourself to be more like this. And yeah, over time, it shifts in a certain direction. And we don't really know where this will end, but we know that whatever we consume will come out in some form or another. So yeah, I think that this answers your question, I hope. A lot has changed, like you said. The thing is, my core will still be the same. I will still podcast. I will still help people beat their phone addiction. But the way I share it, the way I present it will be way more creative, way more artistic and way more personal in the sense that I will start filming videos. This was a huge dream of mine since I had my first ever phone and watched all of these vloggers. I was there thinking, why can't I do the same? Early on it was because I was too little to basically have a YouTube account, and over time I started writing a lot. But now I realize that I want to pursue this passion. I want to start filming videos, going in front of the camera, talking, because what this does is it deepens the connection to your audience on a whole different level. And I saw this from a few creators. Like, I take the biggest example of them all, who inspired me to, at the end, buy my camera, is Daniel Dalen. He's like the king of vlogging in a way that he doesn't really show or try to sell you anything. He just shows the process behind everything he does. He just shows him going to the gym, then him having a meeting with his company, and at the end how he works with his red glasses. I think that the sheer authenticity that brings a video or that gives this character to a video is something that is so missing on X. Everything you see is just people writing the same old, tired of not seeing engagement, do this. I don't know. This is the thing that you see repeatedly. And yeah, some people take a creative approach and make something very interesting that I genuinely like to read. But oftentimes it feels like the same old thing over and over again. And yeah, this is where videos are so much better, because it just allows you to be totally creative. You can still have a post that you wrote that you can just read, but even you standing there looking at the camera doing hand gestures just brings a whole nother way of connecting. But yeah, these three things, and of course offline life, this is one thing that so many people or so many creators totally neglect. They just think that they should be online 24/7 because they can always be something that can happen in the time. They can maybe have a call they can schedule, a sales call. They can have a new client. They can have a new follower. They can have engagement on their post. But at the end of the day, most of these things, they can just wait. Or most of these things are basically totally irrelevant. And once you take the skin out of it, then there's more skin. And you go to the sheer at the end of it. And at the end of all of these things that you are doing online is what you're doing offline. So everything you do offline, how you do it, how you present yourself offline, how you live, basically determines most of the things you do online. And I'm still at a very early stage of creating a concept around it. So that's why I'm not saying that this is the complete truth. But what I notice is that people who are online, who are creating online, should still create online. I love it. It helped me so much in so many different ways. But at the process of doing it in the last 6, or I would even go further, in the last 12 months, until 2 or 3 months ago, I totally neglected what I was doing offline. I totally neglected my friendships. I totally didn't really care about my local communities. I totally threw away social interactions. I totally threw away looking a person in the eyes while I'm talking with them. And all of these things are basic human habits, basic human behavior. that kind of felt like I was falling short, that I was behind in many different ways. Yeah, offline will be a huge topic going further. I will share a lot more what I learned offline. I will connect the people I meet online with my I meet offline with online stuff, but I will bring the offline people to my offline life as well. And this is where like all the videos come in place. I will start making more videos in my city. I will start vlogging. I will start sharing more about what or who the offline Abbi is and how this offline version of myself is like reflecting on my online self. So yeah, definitely a lot coming, and I'm really excited that I even have an opportunity like this to have a brand on the back pocket, because every event in the offline club I attended, I basically went there with something meaningful in my back pocket. So oftentimes I was in conversations with people, and what I learned or what I noticed the most was that I have something in my back pocket, which was my podcast, which was my content, which was my whole online ecosystem, where I can let these people in and build better connections. And just having like this exchange of both worlds is something I'm currently exploring. I explored it a lot in the last few months, but seeing how this will evolve like next year, I can't imagine how much cool stuff will happen, especially me at the offline club and me sharing what I learned there online will be, you have never seen anything like this before, but yeah.
That's so cool, actually. Yeah, I'm so excited, like, to even see you on this journey of like doing vlogs. And like probably we all know Daniel Dallon, that he has like really cool vlogs, and it's like called POV guy because he always like doing something. And I think it's really interesting format because like vlogs were kinda forgotten on YouTube, but like at the end of the day, even like Casey Neistat, like we're doing those vlogs, and so many people connected with him because it's just like documenting your raw just day in your life, and it can really like connect with people because most of like the creations online are kind of like generic and not really personal. And I think that's a great way. And I'm so like happy for you. And I see you're excited about this topic, like your offline club and doing more things that are authentic to you. I think we can say that. And yes, I think that's all for this podcast. We are already on like 1 hour and 12 minutes. So I think that's a great way to cut it here.
Yes, definitely. Thanks you for podcasting me. I was never like in this situation I'm at right now of just getting all of these questions and trying to package my knowledge. But yeah, it was very cool to be like on the other side. And also huge props to how your questions were, or every question you had was very personal and like came from you watching my stuff and researching, which is of course always such a big point. So yeah, thank you for this amazing episode, and yeah.
Thank you, and all of your stuff, I think I will get in the descriptions, and I think people can like should watch your stuff because I think it will be really cool. And of course, like thank you. It's my first podcast, so I'm glad it was. You had a great deep talk, and people got you to know you better.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.